the winning and all that does, that brings you joy. But when you're able to sit back and just kind of look and see the relationships that you've built with people and how much their career with you or with your program has meant to them and to their family, that's pretty powerful stuff.
Hello and welcome to the Beautiful Work Podcast. I am your host, Dan Krikorian. Each episode, we feature a special guest from all walks of life, and we ask them to explore the ins and outs, the ups and downs, the trials and the triumphs of their chosen field. Writers, musicians, coaches, business owners, and everything in between. We peel back the curtain to hear their stories, to walk their paths, to find out how they breathe life into their beautiful work. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of the Beautiful Work Podcast. Today's guest is Matt Lewis, University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh head men's basketball coach, and they are fresh off of a national championship year, and really excited to share my conversation with Matt and all that this year has brought for him, as well as the team and the university. Before we get to that, quick announcements. Thank you all who have been sharing the podcast with friends, family, or whatnot. If you haven't done so already, the quickest and easiest and free way to help support the podcast is to go to iTunes and rate and leave a review. It helps people find the podcast who are looking for stuff like this, sort of a deep dive into people's careers and stories or whatnot. So please search Beautiful Work Podcast, like, and leave a review if possible. Please also consider our newsletter. Once a month or so, I send out a newsletter with all the happenings for this podcast, as well as for music and those that are just joining for the first time, as well as a men's basketball coach. And doing this podcast, I'm also a musician. Just released my 5th record a couple of months ago, and that record, Grandeur, has been garnering some great reviews from here in the U.S. as well as in Europe. And you can find that album, Grandeur, as well as my other 4 on iTunes as well. Just search Dan Krikorian, Krikorian, and you can find all of our stuff online. Last thing, those of you that are local, we have a couple of shows coming up. May 25th at Pacific City in Huntington Beach with almost the full band, just minus the drummer, but outside on the beautiful ocean deck at Pacific City in Huntington Beach. And then we'll be back at Pacific City on June 8th for a Saturday night show, 5 to 7 p.m. on that one. All right, well, that's it for this week's announcements. Without further ado, let's get to the show. Matt Lewis is the head men's basketball coach at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. Matt and the Titans are coming off of a Division III national championship in which they went 29-3 overall. Matt has garnered a number of National Coach of the Year awards, including the NABC, D3Hoops.com, D3 News, and the Glenn Robinson Award Committee. Matt was also named the WIAC Conference Coach of the Year and Division III Public School Men's Basketball Coach of the Year by the Wisconsin Basketball Coaches Association. Prior to joining Wisconsin-Oshkosh as an assistant 7 seasons ago, Matt had stops at Rhodes College in Tennessee, Cornell College in Iowa, and Division I Tulane University in Louisiana. Matt is here today to give us a behind-the-scenes look at the run to a national championship, building a national program from the ground up, and why the city of Oshkosh has been considered one of the best places to live in the U.S. Okay, I am joined now by Matt Lewis. Matt, thanks a lot for coming on the program this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking hoops, and it's been a fun spring, so I'm looking forward to talking with you.
Well, there's a ton to talk about with your last year specifically and going forward. And before we get to that, because there will be plenty of that, outside of basketball, is there anything, a hobby or an interest that you have that perhaps folks up in Wisconsin don't know yet about you?
The people that are around me probably know. I really enjoy golf. I try and play it as much as I can. I was actually out, I played Friday and Saturday. Golf's kind of that competitive outlet besides basketball, because I'm getting to that age where I'm terrified of going and getting injured, and if I try and play hoops anymore. So golf is a safe sport, relatively speaking. So I'd say golf's my hobby.
It's safe unless I'm on the green or the fairway next to you, and then I might slice it, and it's not so safe.
Look out.
Yep, exactly. So are you a pretty good golfer, would you say?
I'm all right. I'm your classic basketball coach golfer that, I can have some solid rounds, and then I can have some rounds where it looks like I should be back in the office working. Okay.
That's about where I'm at too. Good. We're going to kind of go backwards in a second, but I want to start with, you guys win the national championships this year, and it's been a roller coaster ride for you. I know personally with taking over, being the interim head coach, and now you're just recently named the head coach. But at this point, are you able to maybe take us back, and as the clock is, counting down under 4 seconds and your team's running out the clock for the national championship, do you remember what's going through your mind at all?
I don't. I've watched the video enough to kind of see what we were all doing in those moments. We've talked about it with our kind of coaching staff and some of our older guys that have, are graduating, and, it was their last go around, just kind of what that last minute and a half was like, because the game was kind of out of reach. And so we were able to sub guys the way we wanted to sub them, sub each senior. And we had one senior that wasn't in the game, so you're able to sub him in and then sub him back out and kind of get the guys the recognition that they deserved. And so it's just kind of fun to go through it, the way you would want to, apart from, winning a national championship on a buzzer beater or something like that. The video has me, demonstratively throwing my hands up in the air, and I was trying to show one of our guys who hadn't been in that position, I don't think a ton, how to chuck the ball up into the air.
That's right.
And he's kind of looking at me like, what are you talking about? And I go, throw the ball. And he chucks it right off the bottom of the scoreboard. So it just came right back down at him in a hurry, and we're all just laughing at him.
That's good. I did see that.
Yeah, it was a fun minute and a half.
That's awesome. Well, so like I mentioned, you were just recently named the permanent head coach after taking over this year as the interim. And I know now, looking at Oshkosh and the surrounding community as a place for you to kind of settle in with your fiance, I believe. I read. Yep. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I did a little research because I have not personally been to Oshkosh, but it looks like it's high on the list of one of the best smaller cities to live in the U.S. In 2019, Yahoo named it number 4 on the list of most livable small cities in America. And it said one of the reasons 2.61% of all establishments are bars. Okay, so you don't have to comment on that, but I just thought that was an interesting fact on there. You guys have the Milwaukee Bucks G League team in town, the Wisconsin Herd, that plays just down the street from you guys. And then Oshkosh itself is the 3rd largest university in the state of Wisconsin. So maybe obviously I missed a ton of things, but what is it about the community up there that you've really grown to love?
Yeah, I came from a very small town in Illinois. I had 500 people in the town I grew up in a tiny little high school, and you really got to know everybody. In a small town, it was one of those deals where every single person you saw all day long, you knew. And in Oshkosh, I think we kind of have the best of both. Like, I don't walk around the city or the campus knowing everyone, but I run into people, throughout the day that I do know and I have a good relationship with. And then there are people that I get to meet on a daily basis. And so I think it kind of gives you the best of both, where you're not necessarily, constantly, you feel like you're being watched sometimes in a small town, but you're not in this big city where you get kind of lost in the shuffle. Being at the third biggest university in the country or in the state, we have access to some resources that private schools and sometimes some smaller Division threes don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I enjoy. I went to a small private school and I loved my experience. So I wouldn't have traded it for anything. But UW-Oshkosh, being a large state university, provides some opportunities and access to some things that sometimes those small private schools can't provide. And so I think it's just kind of been the best of both. And it's really, over the last 7 years, grown to be our home, our being my fiance and myself. And then I've got several other family members that live here now as well.
Seems like a nice transition over the last year with obviously the administration and school having a lot of support for you as well. And it's hard to not have support after you lead them to a national championship. You mentioned earlier, though, you went to a smaller private university, is Cornell College, and coaching is a very small world, as you know. And so your head coach your senior year is Chad Murray, and at Cornell.
Yep.
Chad Murray played basketball at Chapman University for my boss, Mike Bukowski, and so pretty close, right. Interesting connection there. And
I'd forgotten that anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, Coach Murray is an awesome guy. I couldn't have asked for a better dude to play for as a fifth-year senior. That he was great, and it is kind of crazy how small the basketball world truly is when you start making those steps. It's ridiculously small.
It really is. Well, so let's talk about your path into it. I was going back through your guys' record, and I think it's what's really amazing about your guys' national championship run this year is the fact that just 8 years ago, Wisconsin-Oshkosh was 0-16 in conference, 4-21 overall. That was, I believe, the year before you got there. But your first year, you guys were 2-14 in conference, 7-18 overall. And then you can see this sort of slow progression over the last 6-7 years of a program being built. And you were obviously a very large part of that. Can you speak about the early days and how it's gotten to where it has now?
Yeah, it's kind of been a fast and furious 7 years. I got hired in July 2012 by Pat Yuckham, the former head coach who now is at Wash U in St. Louis. And I had moved back I keep saying back, but I'd never lived in Wisconsin. I moved to Wisconsin to be with my mom and dad, brother, sister-in-law, and now they've got 3 kids. And this is just kind of where family had ended up. And so I moved up here, and Pat calls me up about 2 weeks into my time in Wisconsin and says, "Hey, do you want to coach with me at Oshkosh?" And it just happened to be a common coaching connection that got that phone call. My college coach had actually coached Pat Yuckham, and so he just connected us. And I don't think either of us knew, how good of a fit we were together. It was just the college coach said, "Hey, hire Matt and you'll enjoy it." And so he and I, the first time Pat and I met was at a Culver's in Milwaukee as we were getting ready to go into a July AU event. And he and I sat down and had custard, and we sat down and just started talking about what we wanted Oshkosh basketball to be about. And really, it was not in a great place. I know a lot of the players that were there, in the couple of years prior to us taking over. And there were some really talented guys that just, for one reason or another, they didn't win a ton of games there in the late 2000s and then kind of 2011, 12. And so that first couple of years was all about just, can we get the right guys? And we thought it was a place we could recruit to and get those type of guys. And for us, it was, we wanted, high character kids that were serious students and loved the game of basketball. In the first few years, you weren't able to go out and get the absolute best kids in the country at Division III. You had to go and get the kids that really fit what you were trying to do. And we were fortunate those first couple of years, those first couple of recruiting classes, to get some kids that truly bought into a vision and what we were about and what we wanted Titan basketball to be about. And so those first couple of years, you start seeing that progression. And it was just those guys. I mean, those guys just kind of willed us from 0-16 to eventually, we made 3 straight conference tournament championship games, and we won one of them and got ourselves to the national tournament. And, as we started building some momentum, we were able to go out and get, some even more talented kids. And some of those guys just finished up their careers for us. We were joking. Last year we made the Sweet 16, and we weren't predicted to really go on a run last year. It was our 3rd year in the tournament. In our league, the WEAC is, when you're in when you're in the national tournament, the WEAC is expected to win. Like you're supposed to win multiple games and make a run. And we hadn't done that in 2 years. We'd lost the first game 2 years in a row. So the 3rd year, everybody's like, okay, Oshkosh is going to lose again. That's what they're going to do. And so we won a couple games. We advanced to the Sweet 16, and we were joking. We had gone 0-16 to the Sweet 16. Was kind of what we were joking about. And
yeah,
so it was a little bit of a whirlwind. Like while you're going through it, those 6 years. Last year we really made the run, and this year we won the national championship. But those first 4, 5, 6 years, you're just like, all right, I think we're doing this the right way. And you're just trying to believe in yourself and believe in your guys. But there are times where you're like, man, is this ever going to happen? And then for, the last couple of years for us to really make some runs, it just kind of validates what you're doing. And it gives you a lot of pride looking back at it.
What do you think specifically about the culture that you've helped build started to attract maybe a higher level of talent or a certain type of kid as opposed to maybe the first few years?
Yeah, I think it was initially, we just hadn't been very good. So it's hard, even though we had this mission, this vision, and we were doing our best to sell it. It's hard to get the top kids to say yes when we had other teams in our league that were still winning national titles. I mean, Whitewater and Point, Whitewater won in 2012 and 14, and Stevens Point won in 2015.
Sure.
So while we're trying to build our program, you have others that are winning national titles. So you're trying to get kids while recruiting in schools like that. I think we had a solid vision, and our vision was always to be the elite team in the WEAC and to compete for national championships. And so we were selling that vision, and eventually guys started buying into it. This senior class that graduated, they had multiple opportunities apart from Oshkosh. They had Division II scholarship opportunities and some things like that, but they decided to stay more local and stay home and try and compete for a national championship. And so I think as we were going through it, the previous head coach, Pat Yuckham, he just believed so strongly in what we were doing, and he had this personality that just brought people to him. That eventually guys were like, yeah, this is going to get done. What they're telling us, this vision, we're going to be able to do it if we go to Oshkosh. And so we were able to get some of those kids to say yes. And then those kids ultimately, kind of willed us forward and got us a national championship.
Sure. So going back to last year, you guys build this program from scratch, and then Pat takes another job at Washington University, and you take over. And you take over as a younger coach, a team that had just gone to the national championship game and lost. What was your first, couple of weeks like on the job last year, if you can remember back, getting that team together?
Yeah. I remember, it was kind of a weird time. Pat got the thing in late April. And so there was a week or two there where we were trying to figure out what was going to happen, what the state was going to allow us to do in terms of hiring. And eventually the athletic director, was like, hey, what do you want? I said, well, I want to be the guy. I want to be in charge. And he goes, well, that's what I want. And so he goes, we're going to make you the interim and give you a year to prove yourself, essentially. Give me a year-long interview. And that conversation happened. And then I left for Europe for 2 weeks with my fiance. I already had a trip planned.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't find out that I was officially the interim until I was about 3 or 4 days into that trip. We were standing in the Eiffel Tower, and I found out I was the interim coach.
Wow.
So my first week and a half on the job, I was gallivanting around Europe, trying to work as being a head coach while trying not to get in trouble with my fiance for being on the computer and phone. So right. It was a little bit of a balancing act there.
Absolutely.
I was extremely fortunate. We had so many guys coming back, and we had the leaders and the core of our program coming back that as soon as the athletic director said Matt's in charge, the guys were like, yep, let's do it. Like, there was no hesitation. They were immediately, they threw their trust my direction, and they were just moving forward towards the national championship. And so I think the biggest thing was just those guys were immediately bought in. And I wasn't going to change a ton of what we were doing. Pat had given me a really strong voice for 6 years and all areas of the program. And so I believed kind of what we were doing was who I was and who I wanted to be as a head coach.
Sure.
So I didn't need to get back from Europe, walk into the office and change everything we were doing. I believed in it already. So I got back, and some of those day-to-day things changed during the summer. But who we were as a program and who we are today, it's the same thing we've been the last 7 years. So it was an interesting transition, timing and everything, but it was fairly smooth because the seniors and the leaders of the program let it be that way.
Obviously, you guys had some great senior leaders. A couple of guys Ben Boots was first team All-American. Jack Flynn was on a bunch of All-American, All-Region lists. I mean, you had a great group of guys, and those guys were two of, I know, a really strong group, obviously. For yourself, though, were there things that were more challenging than you originally maybe thought when you were sliding from the assistant job to the head job that surprised you?
Yeah, I think Pat had given me a taste of everything. Like I kind of knew what he was doing on a daily basis, and he knew what I was doing. But we also just kind of trusted each other, and if I felt like something needed to be done, I went and did it, and kind of obviously same thing with him being the head coach. And so when I shifted over, I kind of knew everything that needed to be done, but I didn't know exactly how it had been done at times. And one of the big things that you have to worry about at every level of college basketball, but especially at Division III, you have to worry about the budget.
Yeah.
And you start thinking, you would lie awake at night, and I did some, even late in the season. You get into February and March, and you're laying there, in the middle of the night, and you're like, all right, are we going to have enough money? Because you just have to constantly be fundraising and be aware of what you're spending. And we try and do things at a very high level. We try and operate not like your normal Division III team. And so, the money thing is definitely, I didn't think I was going to worry about it as much, but you worry about it because ultimately it's on you if you have enough money. And, a lot of the other things are just kind of day to day. Like you have, different conversations. Oftentimes you're talking with the same people, but they're just different. Your relationship with the players, while it's still deep and meaningful, you have to have different overall relationships in terms of, what communication you're having with them, when you're having that communication, the tough conversations. So some of those things change when you go from being the assistant to the head coach, and especially when you're going from the assistant to the head coach in the same program. Guys have always viewed you as the young assistant who's friends with them. And now I've got to be the head coach and have the tougher conversations. So I think the guys, again, their trust and belief in me allowed that transition to occur. Just kind of last thing I'd say is more difficult than I think probably a lot of assistants give head coaches credit for is planning practice on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I used to give Pat a hard time. Like, he'd sit there for 3, 4, 5 hours planning practice. I'm like, what are you doing, man? And, this is a long process. And then I remember sitting there this year, and 30 minutes before practice, I'm trying to tweak things because I still don't feel like it's right. And then if you don't have a good practice, if the team doesn't practice well, the first thing you do is you blame yourself for a terrible plan and you throw it off the wall and you're like, man, I got to do better tomorrow. So it's one of those things I think we all kind of take for granted is, oh yeah, practice is easy. We just kind of show up. But all of a sudden you have to plan it on a daily basis. And you end up, I had a lot more respect for what Pat was doing in terms of planning. And really, I got a lot of respect for teachers that go into a classroom every day for an hour and a half at a time or 90 minutes. Something I didn't think
about. At a younger age than most people get a head coaching job, what do you think are some of the traits or the skills that you possess that allows you to kind of command the respect from young men that aren't that much younger than you?
Good question. I hadn't thought a ton about it, or hadn't thought about it that way probably. One thing right now, all I have in terms of immediate family, I've got a fiance and a mom and dad and things like that around, but my fiance and I don't have kids yet. And so I have a lot of time that I can devote to our team. I probably spend more hours with our team or thinking about our team than my fiance would like. Occasionally she would like to take a deep breath and spend some time away. But I think when you invest a ton of time and energy and thought into your team and into the guys and building relationships, that the guys can see that. And that goes a long ways. Like if you have true relationships with the players, that can go a heck of a long ways, as opposed to just trying to tell them what to do or how to do it. All of a sudden, these guys believe in you and you believe in them, and it allows you to coach them, and it allows just for I think a little overall more success. So I don't know if I have other skills, or I'm hesitant to start saying I've got, more knowledge or than somebody else, because I'm 32 and we had a really talented team. So probably the best thing I did this year was I stayed the hell out of the way.
The great management expert Peter Drucker once said, "The most important thing in communication is hearing what isn't being said." One of the things I admire most about some of the great coaches I've been around is their ability to feel a room, to be able to take in the variety of feelings, emotions, and egos of a group of people and filter that down into a common goal, to give direction and get buy-in when they themselves don't always know which way to go. Though some possess an innate ability to understand what their players need at a given moment in time, like Matt Lewis, the best also spend a concentrated amount of time building true and lasting connections with their players or employees, so that trust is rock solid, and it allows leaders to navigate the inevitable ebbs and flows of a season. What I love about Oshkosh's story this year is their collective rebound after a difficult loss in the national championship game just a year prior, and led by a first-year interim coach vying to keep his job. You wonder how different their story may have been had they as a group not been driven by that intense hunger to take the final step they narrowly missed earlier. And in general, how many times you hear how a perceived failure or letdown ultimately drives teams and individuals to heights they may not otherwise have reached. As the great Dalai Lama once said, remember that sometimes not getting what you want is a wonderful stroke of luck. Well, who are some, you mentioned Pat that you worked under, but who are, and we talked about Chad Murray earlier. Are there any other coaching mentors or people that you reach out to in your inner circle that you ask for advice?
Yeah. I'm fortunate. Well, one is and I'll kind of two parts here. One, I worked for a staff at Tulane that I was the director of operations right out of college. And, I was a 23-year-old kid and just played Division III basketball, knew nothing about Division I apart from watching it on TV. And they hired me. They were a new staff at Tulane, had just taken over, and they hired me as the director of operations. So they entrusted a 23-year-old kid who knew nothing about Division I to be the ops guy. And I did that for 2 years, and I learned a ton. If you want to learn how to, get the most out of your day and manage high pressure situations and, juggle a lot of different things, and an ops spot is about as good as you can get for that trial by fire. I mean, you gotta throw yourself into it and figure it out. And so that coaching staff, Ed Conroy was the head coach, who now is at Minnesota, and then Doug Novak was an assistant. Doug's now the head coach at Bethel in Minnesota. Andy Fox was the assistant, who's now at Vanderbilt with Jerry Stackhouse, and then Ronnie Hamilton was an assistant, and now he's at Ole Miss, and still one of my buddies that I lived with. He's an assistant at East Tennessee State, and so those guys you keep in contact with them, and you share stories and whatnot, but you also pick their brain at times, and so those guys have been great. And then my college coach for my first 4 years was Mike DeGeorge. And then he left college basketball, but then got back into it at Rhodes College. And so I actually worked for him about 2 months in the summer of 2010. I hadn't gotten a job at Tulane yet. And so he offered me about $10,000 to move to Memphis. And so I moved to Memphis for 2 months, and then Tulane called me and offered a full-time spot, and I moved back. But DeGeorge is salt of the earth. I mean, he's an unbelievable guy. And anytime I have a question about anything, I can pick up the phone and he'll drop everything to talk with me. So he and Pat, I spend a lot of time on the phone with still. And those guys are both incredible guys.
That's great. Let's talk a little bit about some of the nuts and bolts of the actual season. And just as a coach, I have a question that I wonder when I look out and see someone like yourself that goes on to win a national championship. Your guys' season, so you go to the national championship game last year, then you take over as the interim. You guys start off the season, well, you go 1-1, but then you win 21 straight games in a row. And then towards the end of the year, you guys lose 2 out of 3 before you go to the NCAA tournament. As a coach, were there any times where the team's beliefs were shaken kind of after you win so many games in a row and you kind of have that pressure on your back to keep winning, and then you drop a couple before What was that like in the locker room with those guys going into the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, it was the 21 games was kind of a magical thing. We lost to Wheaton in game 2, and Wheaton played really well on their home floor in their kind of kickoff tournament. And that's when we realized how good Aston Francis was. He put 45 on us in the game, and it's pretty easy to see what we need to get better at. Like, we did not guard, and we were not very disciplined in that game. And so the whole focus for the rest of the non-conference was we have to defend at a high level, and we have to be disciplined by the time we get to WEAC play. And so fortunately, we were able to go and win 9 non-conference games in a row against some quality competition. And then that got to conference play. But once you get there, you knew that every night was going to be a battle. And so we started, our guys started playing really well, and we won some close ones. We found our way to kind of escape with a couple of victories on the road. Guys just found a way to get it done. And then we go and we win our 13th conference game in a row. We were 13-0. We secured the conference championship for the first time in 40 plus years, outright championship, and cut down the nets because some people like, should he cut down the nets? He's still got more to play. And we were like, we're going to enjoy this thing. Like, we earned the right to cut these things down. We'd won it at home, so we cut the nets down. Then we go lose on Wednesday. And we did not play well on the road. And so I remember being in the locker room, and I overheard Ben Boots, who was our senior captain leader. And he was telling guys, all right, now all we got to do is win X amount of games in a row and win a national title. And so his confidence wasn't shaken. Myself as a coach, I was very frustrated with, I didn't think we had him prepared, and we weren't ready to go on the road. But then we play well on Saturday and close out the regular season the right way. And then we play maybe one of our worst games of the year in the conference tournament. And we just got manhandled on our home floor in the semifinal. And then you have a 3-day break before you find out who you're going to play. Like, we lost on a Thursday, didn't play till Monday. It's like, what do you do? Like, you haven't had this long of a break apart from that week at Christmas. So there's a lot of time in there where you're questioning things, and you're like, hey, man, we did not have him prepared on Thursday. We got to have him prepared come next Friday. We got to play better. Our guys, though, they just, as soon as that game was over in the conference tournament, they were done with it, and they were on to the national tournament. Like, they were not distracted. Their confidence wasn't shook. So I think all the credit goes to them for just continuing to believe in what we were doing, and knowing that we had better basketball ahead of us.
That's great. Now, obviously, a testament to what you've mentioned a few times is your guys' senior leadership, or just the leadership at the top that allowed you guys to then go on this unbelievable run where you end up, winning the national championship by 16 and cutting down the nets. Now, when you get home to Oshkosh, what have you seen, or what has it been like back home, and what have you seen in the community since you guys have won that first national championship?
Yeah, it's been pretty awesome. It's probably not quite like Virginia where they packed a football stadium for them, but it's cool in its own way because we got to go and do some pretty special things. They invite you down to the Bucks game, and we got to go out on the court and be recognized at the last regular season Bucks game. And the guys got to watch Giannis warm up. They got to sit right in the front row and watch him work on his jumper, which he needs to continue working on it so that the Bucks can start a dynasty here. But
that's right.
Then we got to go down to the state assembly in Madison and be recognized by the state assembly. We're going to a minor league baseball game this Thursday, and they're letting one of us throw out the first pitch. And so you get invited to a lot of that stuff, but then you just walk around campus, and people that you know and people that you don't know are congratulating you and showing genuine excitement for what you did. And our leadership at the top has been awesome. The chancellor just is constantly thanking us for what we've done and how we represent the university. And So it's been cool, the excitement, everything that surrounds it. But I've talked about it already with some people. They keep asking me, how do you do any better than what you guys did? What, you won a national championship year one. What are you going to do now? And I think it boils down to, like, ultimately, if all we did was try and win a national championship for, that moment in Fort Wayne, or these moments when you're back home and people are praising you, then we probably didn't do it for the right reason, because those moments go by so fast and you almost forget that they happen. I think the thing that we did right, and I think we're going to remember about it, is, the kind of the crazy journey along the way, the everyday moments spent together in practice and building relationships with each other. That's the stuff that's really going to be remembered. And probably has been the most enjoyable thing this spring, is just being able to sit with some of our guys and discuss, you remember that crazy thing that happened in the hotel, after we won, or this or that. That's probably been more special than all the other things that we've been asked to do.
I did see an interview where somebody asked you about, what about next, all that sort of stuff. And you had a good quote about, you got some great advice from someone to just really try to enjoy the whole experience. And so I know you guys have done a lot of fun stuff as a team, but what about yourself personally, you and your family? What have you done to sort of, or have you been able to at this point sit back and really kind of soak it in?
We've had going kind of Easter and some of those days where we've hung out as a family. We haven't sat down for the sole purpose of talking about, the run and everything. It's something that's been pretty meaningful. I think for my entire family. My fiance, obviously, she gives a lot of her time and energy to what we're doing at Oshkosh, and she's got a tough and time-consuming job as well. But whenever we need something in the middle of the season, she's always very supportive. My parents are at every single game. My brother comes to all the games, and he's always holding one of his daughters while he yells at the official on our behalf. My sister-in-law comes to all of them, and it's not easy juggling, 3 daughters as they're trying to run around the gym, and your husband's locked into the game. But I think the coolest thing is just kind of seeing how much it's meant to my immediate family, and how much pride they get in wearing, the national championship gear, and talking with it about anybody that'll talk about it. And my family they all left me. I was home alone this weekend. I've got some things this week I couldn't miss, but they all flew to the Virgin Islands without me.
Wow!
And they get off the plane. They're all wearing their national championship gear. Man, this is a celebration. You guys should have picked a better week.
Oh, that's good. Well, I'm glad you're getting a chance and your family's getting a chance to enjoy it, rightfully so. Hey, how do you continue yourself to grow, or feed your brain? Are you a book reader, podcasts? What do you sort of do to do that?
Yeah, I'm not very good at reading books anymore. As a kid, I read a ton. I don't read very well anymore. I get distracted by too many other things. I listen to podcasts quite a bit, especially this spring. I'm a big basketball immersion guy. Uh-huh. I've got a 30-minute commute in the morning, and so I'll listen to basketball immersion, or while I'm walking the dog or something, I'll be playing podcasts, and I really enjoy doing that. I watch a decent amount of NBA, and then I just like talking about random ideas and concepts with people. Probably the worst thing I'm at is coaching clinics. I'm really bad at going to coaching clinics and getting anything out of them. I get too easily distracted by talking to people and doing whatever else. And so I'm really bad at coaching clinics. I got to try and maybe work on getting better at those. But I've always enjoyed the talking with people, in small groups, and listening to podcasts and that sort of stuff, more than sitting and watching people talk at a group of people.
And then you mentioned basketball immersion, which Chris Oliver, we're fortunate he was on this podcast earlier in the year, and so I'm a big fan of his podcast as well, so shout out to him.
Yeah, he does stuff, great
Really
stuff.
really good conversations. Hey, what's one of the best investments that you've made in your career?
Yeah, I, I've probably taken two kind of big risks, and I think they were just kind of trusting and um, investing in my career. Doing like I moved to New Orleans, and I had a connection to get me to Tulane, but I didn't really know anybody there apart from just meeting them through a basketball camp. And so I kind of throwing myself into it, moving across the country, kind of at a drop of a hat. Um, I think that was a big investment. Those 2 years that I spent down there did wonders for me. And I think I appreciated them this year when I was juggling so many things and dealing with high pressure stuff. I was dealing with, not the basketball things when you're the op spot, but, just a lot of things on a daily basis where you got to make some decisions that affect a lot of people. And so I think that was really big. And then I ended up walking away from Tulane without a job because I really wanted back to the Midwest and back to Division III. And so I quit Tulane without a job, and a lot of people called me nuts. But I just took a risk and said, I'm going to go back there and something's going to work out. And I was here for a couple of weeks, and eventually I got the phone call from Oshkosh, and it's very fortunately it's worked out better than I could have ever planned it. So I think those are probably the two biggest things is I just kind of made decisions and trusted and went with it.
Well, you definitely, looking at now, made some really good decisions. And I have to just say, didn't want to miss it, but you've been named, Coach of the Year nationally from numerous different publications, D3 Hoops, NABC, collegeinsider.com. So those risks definitely paid off for you this year, and obviously going forward, being named the permanent head coach. Of all the things that you have to do that you're juggling as a head coach, what about coaching itself brings you the most joy?
It's a good one, really good one. The relationship piece, and everybody talks about that being kind of the thing. I don't want to be cliche, but I think that is the thing that gives me the most joy about it. I was fortunate for the 6 years as the assistant here at Oshkosh to work for a guy that eventually he was the guy I spent the most time with. He ended up being kind of my best friend up here, the head coach. So that relationship I really valued. And then the relationship with the players and just kind of watching guys grow and mature over the course of their 4 years with you is something pretty special. And we had our team banquet last weekend, and one of our guys is a local guy, and he agreed to come to Oshkosh and kind of forego a couple other really good opportunities. And one of the reasons he stayed was because his family's so invested in it. His granddad goes to every practice and every game, and his dad, mom, brother, sister, everybody's around. And I got fairly emotional at the banquet because his career was over, and I could just kind of see how much it meant to him and to his family, the last 4 years and everything that they'd been through, and ultimately winning a national championship. And so the winning and all that does, that brings you joy. But when you're able to sit back and just kind of look and see the relationships that you've built with people and how much their career with you or with your program has meant to them and to their family, that's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, wow, that's really special. Well, Matt, I really thank you for coming on this evening and talking about this whole year. And really, I know you guys are going to have a great group coming back, and you'll continue to just build that program. And so thank you very much for coming on. Where can people find you to potentially follow you online, as well as anything you're doing with basketball?
Yeah, I'm fairly active on Twitter. I don't always necessarily post a ton of basketball concepts or content. I post random stuff, but if you want to connect with me on Twitter, I'm fairly easy to find on there, and just UW Coach Lewis. And then if you really want to just get in contact with me about anything, find my email online on our UW-Oshkosh Titans website, and shoot me an email. My cell phone number and office number are listed there. Give me a call. I'm pretty good about responding to emails, calls, texts, all that sort of stuff. So if anybody ever has questions or anything, just reach out. I'd be happy to help any way I can.
Perfect. Well, appreciate it. I know you were responsive to me, and I appreciate that. And before we end tonight, I will leave you with the last word. So is there anything else that you would like to say before we close?
Yeah, I think kind of joking aside, the Bucks are up 11 right now as we record this. So hopefully when it goes live, the Bucks have secured the way to the Eastern Conference Championship. In all seriousness, you mentioned just kind of the coaching circles and how small the coaching world is. It is a pretty awesome thing. And so if anybody is listening and they want to get into coaching or they're in coaching and they're debating whether they should stay in, I think coaching is an incredibly rewarding career. You might not always become wealthy or rich. A lot of us won't. We'll just kind of be comfortable. But there are some rewards that come from coaching that go far beyond having money. So if you want to get into coaching, especially at the college level, I'd say give it everything you have because you will ultimately you'll really enjoy it. And I think you'll look back and be like, that was the right decision. So if anybody ever needs help getting into the coaching game, there are a lot of people out there that are willing to help, and I'd be happy to be one of those people. Wow.
Well, thanks, Matt, for that. And once again, congratulations on all your success this year, and hope to talk to you soon or run into you somewhere around the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun to talk some hoop and Oshkosh basketball. Thank you.
That was a ton of fun and great to hear from Matt Lewis, and thanks to him for sharing the inside story on their run, University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh men's basketball to a national championship this year. We wish them the best of luck as well moving forward, as well as Matt personally. Hey, all of the songs on today's show are off of my new record, Grandeur, which you can find on iTunes. Grandeur was recently called a top 10 album of the year over in Europe, and it'd be great if you could check it out and download it or listen to it on iTunes or Spotify. Also, please consider going to our website, dankrikorian.com or beautifulworkpodcast.com, and signing up for our newsletter to stay up to date on shows and information with this podcast. Well, until next time, whatever you're doing, wherever you are, keep making that beautiful work. We'll see you soon. Welcome to the super secret ending. If you've not had a chance to visit our Patreon page where you can support the podcast, please consider doing that at patreon.com/beautifulworkpodcast. And you can, for a couple of bucks a month, help support the show as well as get some cool extras. Speaking of extras, we are closing in. It'll be a few weeks from now, but we are having our first weekly series where it's going to be one episode per day for a whole week that focuses on one area of interest. And that area of interest this first time around is whiskey and bourbon industry. And we have been putting together the shows for that week, and they are a lot of fun and a lot of great people involved. So stay tuned, sign up for the newsletter, and we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks to start off Whiskey Week. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.